All right, what's up, me Duole podcast listeners? I am Stuart Anderson. Welcome to episode 112 with professional bike racer Zach Calton. Grateful for Zach and thankful for Charles Smart, who joined me as co-host on this episode. So good to talk to Zach, our local legend, local pro, to follow his career and especially to follow everything he's doing in the Lifetime series is so fun. We start off the conversation talking about point to point and how Zach was showered, at home eating dinner and watching a movie by the time Charles and I were still finishing. So he set the course record and won in 2024 point to point, which is so cool to hear about his story and his passion for riding that race. So a lot of great topics, really fun to meet Zach. If you don't know him, what an incredible guy and an incredible Utah representative. So thankful for him, thankful for Charles, and the fun hour that we had together. A few announcements. We have a few just right at the outset. We're redesigning the team kits for 2025, and those should be available soon. We're really looking forward to a little redesign, some new looks for the team. And then we also set the dates for team camp next year, last weekend of March. I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to say those dates, but last weekend of March 2025. We'll be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday for team camp. Obviously, more information to come there, but super grateful for each of you. So thankful for our sponsors. We're kind of re-upping for 2025, who's in, and without a doubt, the team members of Mi Duole are the sponsors of this team. We don't go out and find like other companies or other people to raise money for us, but through our sponsors, we are able to do so much, particularly provide incredible discounts on team gear, to provide an awesome team camp and also an event, our Canyons Challenge event. Through our team sponsors, we're able to host this podcast and all the incredible things that happen behind the scenes. I'll just name a few, but one, crash replacement kits. So you know how crappy it is when you crash and how terrible the season goes. Usually we try to find out about those crashes, reach out, and if you're wearing a Duole kit, try to make your day a little better by replacing the kit. And team fees and sponsorship money pay for stuff like that, as well as our huge donation from the Canyons Challenge to charitable groups and other donations to things that make the Utah cycling community better. So a huge thank you to our sponsors, thankful to each of you that make this team awesome and your example and leadership, which makes Mi Duole 40 years strong, one of the best teams in the state. So big shout out to everybody. Thanks. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode with Zach. Grateful for him, and thanks for listening. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mi Duole podcast, episode 112, which is wild. I keep saying that every time we do a new episode, how much time we've spent doing this, but super grateful to do it. So awesome. Cha, and dude, Charles, you're rocking the new headphones. Look at those. If you're looking at YouTube, you need to jump over and see Charles's new headgear.
Had to upgrade for the pod.
Charles was tired of listening to his microphone echo. So dude, you sound good. And then Zach Calton joining us live from Arkansas. So he's in between races. Big Sugar and Little Sugar. So you did Little Sugar last week, Big Sugar this week. So, hey, man, what's going on?
Not a lot. Thanks for having me.
We just found out he actually listens to some of the episodes. I'm like sweaty now. I'm getting nervous. This is awesome. Super grateful. We are in the thick of designing 2025 kits. They're almost ready, Charles. We're close. I had some major dissenting votes for the redesign. So we took it back to the drawing board for just a little bit to appease some haters, but grateful for everyone's opinion. Am I grateful for their opinion, Charles?
Absolutely.
I am. I'm grateful that anyone would feel that they would feel confident enough to share their opinion on what we look like. So very good. That's great. So that should be coming soon. And then we're planning team camp. We already set the dates for 2025 in St. George. So, dude, let's go. Charles, we're ready. End of March, last weekend of March, we're going to be down there.
Great weekend.
Best weekend of the year. Zach, obviously you're invited. You can join us.
St. George, end of March that's the time to be there. So I might just have to show up.
All right. Yeah, we always do. I think it's a classic now. Like we're gonna have to do that collab climb every time we go now. Everybody loves it.
So good.
It's one of the best in the state, I think.
Yeah, maybe one of these times we'll actually make it to the top instead of last year, Zach, everyone was like running on the snow, like trying to get past the
That
ending
one takes
part.
forever to melt. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
I've had the
worst.
same issue. I don't think I've ever made it to the top because it's like by the time it melts, it's kind of like time to be back north
For
riding.
real. I agree.
Anyway,
If you don't know Zach, shame on you. We're grateful to have him. Charles and I were just discussing, Zach, maybe you could talk a little bit about, we all know you used to work for Specialized. Now you're full time. Can you talk about that for just a sec? Like who you are, what you're doing full time now as a professional?
yeah. So I am racing full time, and then I also do a little bit of coaching on the side too. So
Okay.
that kind of support. The goals are aligned there with coaching and racing. But yeah, I mean, I worked at a shop for like 6 years through college and a little bit after. And then I worked, yeah, like you said, at Specialized in like a warranty, kind of after sales support for shops role for a few years. And kind of during that time, transitioned from racing cross country Olympic to kind of the marathon, and then the gravel opportunities came up. And I kind of saw the opportunities with the Lifetime Grand Prix and was like, okay, I should do a push to try and get some support and try to get into this. And yeah, the stars kind of aligned what felt like very slowly, but and then I was able to quit my job in May to
Cool.
race and coach full time.
Nice.
Yeah,
A few things about Zach. You won Crusher in 2019, which is so awesome. I mean, it's awful, but it's awesome. U.S. short track under 23, first place in 2022. And then what really, I mean, not caught our attention, but Charles and I were both at Point to Point in 2024 where you took first place, which is cool. I love to read your story on Instagram about it, how you were, it's something that you've always wanted to do. You've done the race many times. So that was cool to watch.
yeah.
So man, we couldn't be more excited to have you on. I mean, Charles and I we did 10 minutes of what we're going to ask. There's no way we're going to get through it all. So, but all good. Can we just do a quick talk about point to point? That's where I want to start. That's where I want to talk about everything.
Of course.
Charles, can I go first?
Go for it. Yeah.
Let's do it. Zach, you are deep in Lifetime. Decided to do point to point. Can you walk us through like, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to add this to my schedule. Was it a good idea? Are you glad you did it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, point to point is definitely one of my favorite races of the year, and it's also one that I've come close to winning a few times. It was kind of like my first foray into marathon racing outside of like because I started with NICA and then kind of got into cross country and that was like the first race I did that I found some success in outside of cross country. And so, it's just like, it's my local trails. And the first time I did it, like Todd Wells showed up in his prime and Jeff
Mm.
Kabush and, Keegan, like all these legends would do it. And anyway, I just have always really enjoyed it. And Jay, who has since sold it, but, founded the race has always been super cool to me. So, yeah, if I can, if it's a free weekend, I'll be there for years to come. But yeah, definitely, it's a busy fall of
Mhm.
racing. So there's a lot of fatigue, and yeah, as you know, I've been racing since February, so
Right.
tough to say if it's the right call. But I think with it in the rearview mirror and having won finally, I'll say it's the right call. But I don't know if it set me up super well for the rest of the season. But it was worth it for me.
Double click on that a little bit because I think you mentioned in social media like you kind of been battling a little bit of like sickness, and then you had a really good effort and day that day. But like, dive
Yeah.
into that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I've had like a good season up until Leadville. I felt like I just didn't have kind of like a top end. Like I still finished really solid at Leadville. I was really proud of my race, but kind of had a very bad start and fell back to like 40th and just kind of had to pick guys off for the whole day. And then I did the Breck Epic, which starts the following morning. Sorry, give me 1 second to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. The following morning. So, and then that's 6 days of high altitude, difficult racing. And I ended up coming out of that just feeling, I mean, you kind of expect it, right? You're racing 7 days in a row, like you should feel kind of crappy. So it's hard to determine like, oh, am I overtraining and like really causing myself issues, or is this going to be a tough week? Get through it, recover, and you'll be fine. And point to point was kind of the first test. After that, I kind of laid low for a week, and then really I didn't do any sort of efforts or any testing of myself until point to point, and then it went well. So I was like, oh, I'm good. But ever since point to point, and even before point to point, I've just felt very like flat. Don't like, point to point's one where you kind of you just diesel it, right? Like you're not like killing yourself to make a group. You're just like, pushing really solid all day, but you're not like really pushing the top end. So I think that was okay. But when I went to Schwam again and the rad, and just even, my own efforts, I just have felt like I didn't have that top end. So yeah, and that's to be expected a little bit with the amount we race, and they're all like 6 hours now. It seems like it's hard to do that for 8 months. Great.
Well, 9 hours for me and Charlie.
Yeah, it's at a minimum. Yeah.
What was different this year, Zach? You think with point to point? Like, what when you look back, are you like, oh, this was the thing that happened that I finally knocked it out of the park?
Yeah, I think I just raced it aggressively. Like I raced it like I could win it. I've raced it in the past very defensively, and that's worked pretty well. People kind of unravel at altitude. Especially in like my early years, it was a lot of guys coming that maybe weren't so good at altitude or didn't know the trails quite as well. And so I could kind of just let them make mistakes, let them kind of unravel. And I would kind of like just accidentally get a solid result. But then, guys like Keegan or Alex Grant or Todd Wells would win, but I would be happy with the result. And because I found success doing that, that's kind of how I raced it even the last few years, even when I was maybe capable of winning it. Whereas this year I just went to the front from the start and just set a super hard pace and just, hopefully everyone else would crack, and it ended up working out.
What walk us through, like, because a lot of the team has raced point to point, like very familiar with, a lot of these local races, but at what point were you kind of like, okay, it's like separations happen, like I'm in lead position. And then from there, when we were like, hey, I know course record's kind of tricky on point to point because the course changes a little bit, but like race record, you set the race record. Like when were you like, oh, this is in my sights to do?
Yeah, I mean, just based off of last year and a few mistakes and racing it defensively, and still was like, we're like pushing the 6 hour mark. I felt like I was fitter this year, and so I did set like splits at each feed, because even though the course has changed, the places where it's ideal to get bottles have been pretty consistent. So, you can kind of just go back on Strava and be like, okay, I crossed Marsac at like 10:30 last year or whatever the time is. And so I kind of had a few of those, the feed zones, like, written down as like, okay, if I'm ahead of this point, I'm on a good way. And then I also know that the race really seems to kick off every year going up Team Big Bear. It's long enough into the race, and there's really no hiding because you're now, that's like your first time into the super high altitude, and it's just kind of that rough surface. You're not going very fast, and if your mistakes are very obvious at that point in the race. So I knew I was going to hit that area pretty hard. And that's where I got a little gap on Truman, and I knew like I had to, establish it and grow it if I wanted to stay away, because especially if I think he's someone who like does really well at like holding a wheel. So if you can get away, out of sight, out of mind. But if you
Mhm.
Mm.
can't, then he's not gonna give up.
So from Team Big Bear, that was it. Like you were
Yeah,
solo.
we went to Deer Valley together, and then I got a 2-minute gap by the time we crossed, like where you crossed the road near Empire Pass. I had 2 minutes there, and then yeah, I was just solo from Team Big Bear to the finish.
Dang, that's awesome. So
That's so
good.
cool.
No mechanicals or anything, just all good.
No, smooth day. Yeah,
Dang, that's
lucky.
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, and uh we were I mean we were gonna do this podcast, I think like a month ago. But you got invited to go represent the United States, which like you were apologetic for, and me and Charles were like, dude, that's the coolest thing of all time.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk about that experience? I have this little paragraph that you wrote on Instagram where you kind of like admitted that Instagram's not a great place to have this discussion. But can you first talk about your experience there, what it was like, what it was, what you felt like wearing USA, and then maybe I've got a follow-up question about United States Cycle Association about it.
Yeah, I mean, to start with the positive notes, like it's really cool to race a world championship. It's always an honor to get selected. It's cool to see some of the best guys in the world in their national colors too. I had a bad call up, but so did some other guy, like Chris Blevins and Simon Andreasen, who went 1-2, also had no marathon points.
Mm.
So they were in the very back. They ended up like sat like at the start. You got like 80 guys kind of like gridded up. They ended up like going like 20 feet off the back so they could get a running start. Anyway, and they passed the entire field and won. So no excuse there. Um, but yeah, like lining up with some of the best racers in the world, because you race like the same guys in and out in the Lifetime Grand Prix, and but I still think like the XCO scene and the top guys there are just like really incredible athletes, and don't get a cross pass with them quite as much as I did like earlier in my career when I was racing XC. So that's really cool, and wearing the kit's really cool. But yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on some issues in my post about, we're in the US, we have a world champs on home soil, and I felt like even being aware of all the funding issues that USA Cycling has, and the priorities being the Olympics this year, and even being aware of all that, I felt like it was maybe the support level and like just showing up uh, was below like the bare minimum,
Mm.
uh, I would say. So yeah, it's tough to when the money is out that you've allocated for that type of stuff as an organization. How are you going to pay people to go and be there? But
Yeah.
anyway.
Is that a 2024 issue with the Olympics, or do you think is this a more systematic problem that persists beyond Olympic years?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a problem beyond Olympic years. I think it's especially an issue in Olympic years. I mean it's what is the return on marathon worlds for USA Cycling, right? Like I think that I don't know their funding situation completely, but it's like it seems that Olympic performance is kind of how they get their money,
Mm-hmm.
and marathon is not in the Olympics, gravel is not in the Olympics. So these don't get the Olympic development funding like track, like road, like cross country Olympic,
Mm.
which makes sense. And then, again, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I have had a few conversations with a few people at USA Cycling, and it seems like the money that comes from licensing sort of stays grassroots. Like that doesn't go to the performance arm of USA Cycling, like world championships and things at all. Like it funds the races that those license holders attend, and the insurance and the officials and all that. And it's not like that is able to, send mechanics and directors and, marketing or whatever to snowshoe for the world championships. So, yeah, it's an ongoing issue. I think like I, right after that, marathon worlds was gravel worlds. And there was a few articles that came out where it's like, why are the top US gravel racers not going to Belgium? And it
Right.
was very similar reasoning, it's,
Yeah.
they knew that there wasn't going to be support, and it's one
Wow.
thing to go to West Virginia with no support and no guidance and no team, and it's a whole nother thing to go to Belgium
Belgium.
without
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So,
Huh. So
Interesting.
so
yeah.
interesting. And you had an interesting day, right? Mechanical, and then I loved how you said that you just like were just in the back, like carefree, like here we go, here goes nothing. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, with the kind of a last minute selection, as well as a bad, like I don't have the marathon points. I haven't gone to Europe and raced a marathon World Cup to get those points. And not being a super big priority on my calendar, it was just like, well, like I'm just gonna ride as hard as I can and not put a ton of pressure on myself to get to the front instantly. And yeah, just kind of pick guys off one at a time. And then yeah, I did flat like 15 or 20 miles in, and that
Oh,
took a couple attempts to plug. And then as I was like looking back to see if it was holding, I ran off the course and crashed. So yeah, I had a little lapse in concentration there, kind of
uh,
in the middle, like or first third, but
uh,
finished really strong and passed like 25 guys on the last.
cool.
There's a very long, shallow drag at that race, super technical first 30 miles, and then
Hmm.
shoots you out onto this like 25, 30 mile kind of like 2% average, but sort of just undulating fire road.
Mm,
And was able to just make up a ton of spots there and finish 31st and beat some guys that are kind of legends in marathon racing. And, that I see racing near the front of the Cape Epic, and some guys that I know from the Grand Prix that were there. So I was proud of the result.
nice. Yeah, I know. I mean, you were like, we were texting you Tuesday, and you were like, "Oh, I just got invited," and then you're like, "Left Wednesday," and I'm like, "How's he even paying for this? Like, how's he even arriving?" I mean, because
Yeah,
you have to
it
pay
was
for it, right? I mean, it's your money, right? I
100%.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yep. No, literally nothing
Which is
is,
crazy considering like you're representing our country. It's like
yeah.
I mean, I get it. I understand the frustration. That's
And
wild.
there's a fee too.
Oh,
Like,
perfect.
yeah, like it's your own travel, your own hotel, bring your bike, bring your mechanic, and you got to pay a
And you want a
hundred
USA
bucks
jersey? It's
extra.
$400.
Yeah, anyway, I was gonna add my tip from last year,
Oh
but
my gosh.
yeah,
So good. Um, Charles, butt in whenever you want. I want to move on to there is a KOM I want to talk about, Zach, because we have ridden it so many times. I love the fact that you have the Francis Peak KOM. Only because I think it's the wackiest, one of the wackiest segments ever. It's like the longest climb. That road is crazy.
yeah,
Anyway, I've got a couple fast-paced questions. Is that okay?
totally.
Okay, so favorite I guess I'll just ask it. Is Francis Peak favorite local ride, or do you have another favorite?
Ooh, I really like Francis Peak. I would say my go-to climb is the North Ogden Divide, a little more
Hmm.
accessible from where I live. Um, but yeah, I love Francis Peak. You just can't beat the view up there.
Yeah, you can't be those ATVs coming down either. Just
Yeah, yeah. You gotta
all
Those
right.
blind corners, we've had a teammate or two almost go head
Yeah.
on into those guys.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's hectic.
favorite place to travel? Any place that you'd love to go?
Oh, I love St. George.
Nice.
That's the classic. That's where I go all winter. And then Tucson in the winter as well is really fun doing the shootout and being down there. But those are kind of the only places that I go like habitually. Everywhere else
Yeah.
I've just like been like once or twice or
Yeah.
whatever.
What,
Cool.
how, with the like winter training and riding, in the past you had a job, so I imagine you probably needed to be for the most part in and around kind of Salt Lake or Ogden. Does that
Yeah,
change? Does that change this year? Like, how do you think about living in a warmer climate during the winter.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I only quit my job this May. So like as far as dealing with a winter without a job is I've never done.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of like, scheming right now. I don't know exactly what that'll look like for me, but yeah, I think probably sometime in Tucson. There, it's kind of the warmer place, but it's also got a really cool culture there during the winter of like
Mm.
a lot of people putting down the bricks for the season. So there's always someone to train with, and that weekend ride is really, really world class. And it's just a ton of fun being around a bunch of people that are motivated like that. But yeah, I mean, I've worked remote, so I've kind of been able to go for like 2-3 weeks, like
Hmm.
once a winter, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's kind of the absolute limit, that I could pull off
I know
before.
Charles, this is a good place to insert your question about Zach's coach.
Yeah, tell us. I know I listened to, I think it was the Payson podcast from a year or so ago. You talked about kind of having Keegan come on as your coach. I guess
Yeah.
maybe the first question is he still your coach? And the follow up would be love to hear how your training approach and racing approaches have evolved as you've had him in your corner.
Yeah, he is still my coach. And yeah, that started in 2021, I want to say.
Mm.
I kind of mostly self-coached prior to that, and that was just more of a financial decision than anything else because I was paying for school and everything else while working as close to full-time as I could at a bike shop, and it was just like the money for a coach wasn't really there. Um, and then in 2021, during COVID with no racing and things, I kind of like I took a big step back from racing and like pursuing
Hmm.
any sort of sponsorships. I still ride, it's like I'll always ride. But anyway, but I was having a tough time like really getting back into the rhythm in 2021. So I texted him and was like, "Yo, can you coach me?" So he's coached me ever since then, and it's been really, really good for me, because we just have sort of like an informal relationship that is super easy to like shoot ideas back and forth, and it's not super like I don't know. I think he has a good grasp of what I respond to and what I like to do, and I think we both kind of respond to similar types of training and things. So it's easy to sometimes you get with a coach or whatever, because I've done short stints with other coaches, and it's like they just don't see eye to eye with like what you want or the races you want to do, or it seems like they're kind of training you just how they've trained.
Mm.
But uh whether or not you seem to respond to that. So yeah, I've been stoked with it, and yeah, he's just kind of slowly built me up, and it's been pretty good.
Cool.
That's really interesting. It seems like, that's like a really unique alignment you'd have with him because you're racing so much of the same, I mean, the Grand Prix and so many of the same events that like he has probably perspective that I'd imagine most other coaches couldn't provide.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, the preparation and insights to like what he's gonna run, and the thing is like what he runs and where he's going to make moves and things like I don't think it's any secret that he kind of dictates how a lot of these races go. So having a little inside line there doesn't hurt for sure. um, and yeah, we bounce a ton of ideas off of each other too, because like he's obviously my coach and a great racer, and I'm kind of a bike nerd guy. So I think I think about like the equipment side just as much, if not even more than he does. And so we'll just kind of chat about stuff like that. And one thing, like, I don't know, he really likes talking about bike racing. You'd think it'd kind of get old, but it doesn't seem like it does. So he loves talking about it and nerding out on every little like, am I going to run a 52 or a 50? Like, this is critical.
On the bike nerd component of the racing world, like it's interesting how like we've seen, like I think it was Dylan Johnson last year with the drop bar in Leadville. At least that was the first time I was aware of seeing it. Then Keegan did it this year. He saw other people do that. Like, what's your kind of hot take on, is that like the way of the future for that particular race or format of racing? Like, what do you think happens there?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this in my like Leadville bike check. I ran flat bars and I definitely considered running drop bars. I think for someone like Keegan, it makes a ton of sense, right? Like he's solo for the last 65 miles of the race pretty much every year. So being aero and comfortable being aero is super critical for him. Whereas someone like myself and the way that I'm approaching the race, it's trying to be in the best group that I can be in. And I do think like for example, this year I was with Dylan in that, I don't know, have you guys done Leadville?
Yes.
Yeah. So, the downhill from the top of St. Kevin's to the next climb, you're on pavement that's like high speed for a while, right? I was with Dylan there, and he's the guy with, on the drop bars, and literally like a group of 20 is just looking at him like, go ahead, drop bar guy, And
Arrow dude.
yeah, you kind of have to worry about like the psychology of the other people and how the group dynamic is going to play out. And like, yeah, if you're in a group, I don't think it's quite as critical at Leadville. But at the same time, if everyone switches to drop bars, and you get to the top of power line descent and you're the only guy with flat bars and you can descend at 45 seconds faster, but then you're solo off the front by 45 seconds, like, did you really gain anything? So you kind of have to see like what the guys that you're trying to beat are doing and make decisions off of that. So that's why I ended up running flat bars. I thought it's unlikely that I'm going to spend a ton of time solo in the wind on the flat, and that's really where I'm going to be making time. And I do want to be comfortable, and I really don't want to lose a good group on Columbine because I can't descend quite as well with a drop bar.
That's so like well thought out. I never would have. I just can't wait when we show up next year and there's gonna be like age groupers with them, and they're like, oh. And I'm gonna do Zach's face. I'm gonna do exactly. I'm like, go ahead, dude. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, dude, I can't
pull us out, bro.
2 arrow. I can't pull through.
I
can't pull through.
Honestly, it probably makes sense for the right, professional riders, but I'm like, I don't want to descend power line, which isn't even that bad, but like just hoods versus like flat bars. Like
at
like
race
that.
speed, it's not like super technical, but it's, like you can smack some rocks on power line for sure. Yeah.
We're coming back down. What's the turnaround point out there? The
line.
Columbine?
Yeah. Columbine. It's like, I don't want to go down that either with like, you've got people in those tight, like going up right next to you. I don't know, but that probably speaks more to me than the industry.
No, I think I'll be running flat bars for years to come. We'll see though. We'll see.
One question I've got to ask you, Zach. So our team, like every year there's a big group, probably the most in focus race with our group is Lodija. Like there's guys who've done it, 20 years in a row, never
30.
missed a year, 30 years. I mean, it's like an institution within the Duole cycling club.
Oh, yeah.
But over the last, I'd say 5, maybe 10 years, like Crusher kind of became the number 2 race, I would say. And then like Point to Point is somewhere in there. And now kind of like Leadville's asserting itself. And so the question that always comes up when we're chatting amongst friends and talking about like what race is, what race is the hardest, right? And so I'd love to hear your perspective on, there's such different races, but how do you think about, call it Leadville, Crusher, and Point to Point? Because I feel like those are the 3 that in our group kind of get lumped together, and like, how do they compare? And if you do well in one, how does that translate to the other?
Yeah. Do you mean just you've mentioned like how hard they are, or just like,
in terms of difficulty? Like, I guess the first question is like, what's the most difficult of those 3 in your mind? And then, let's start there.
Of those 3, I think Leadville is the most difficult. That altitude is just so brutal, and Columbine is so steep that you can't like you can't you can't just like, oh, I'll just kind of spin up this thing and, take it easy and pace myself. It's like you have to go full gas for the last like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of Columbine. And it's really hard to like have a great last 3 hours, 4 hours after an effort like that at that high of an altitude. And it also has a little bit of group dynamics too, which, like I kind of mentioned at point to point, you you're not super desperate to make a group, right? Because the average speed of that race is, like I think I was like still under 13 miles an hour, and you're not like desperate to get a draft. Whereas at Leadville, there is a little bit of that, so you do find yourself like getting like coerced into going deeper than you want to make, a certain group and altitude, and especially extreme altitude. You can definitely pay for that. um, I mean, Crusher is very hard too, but I think Leadville just being a bit longer and a bit higher, it's the toughest. And then I would say for me, point to point is probably second. Crusher's a little bit easier. Um, I mean, Crusher's tough, but it's just not quite as long. So that's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
The thing we always talk about is like point to point, it feels like you don't have like this same like just long grinded out climbs, but like if you don't pay attention for 1 second, you're catching your bars on a tree or something dumb, which like we've seen great riders, like that's the end of their day, right? Like you go over the bars, you break your collarbone, like you're done. Like that's a
Yeah.
possibility in Crusher, but it feels less kind of mentally intense, I think.
No, that is true. Yeah, like at 2022 point to point, I crashed out in like the first 5 miles and just like really hurt my wrist, and it was like, well, guess that's it. So
Mm.
and then yeah, this year it's like, okay, I've got a big gap, take it easy, but you're tired, and it seems like that race gets rougher and more technical as the race goes on too. And yeah, you start pinging your rim on some rocks and thinking you're gonna flat your tire. It's mentally taxing for sure.
Yeah. Um, Zach, I always kind of ask this question, but um, when when you look back and you're like, man, I think that I'm good at this activity. I'm gonna make a go for it. Um, is there a thing that you feel separates you, or as a second part of that question, what makes somebody good at this activity, at cycling in general? Were you like, dude, I'm just mentally strong, or I'm ultra competitive, or I'm just good at endurance? Is there anything that stands out where you're like, I think I can do this. I think I'm gonna try this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of things, but I think the most important thing with getting good at anything is consistency. There's so many details to get bogged down in, with any sport, but especially cycling, equipment, activation drills before your ride, a cool down, your perfect recovery shake, perfect nutrition, um, sleep, stretching, foam rolling, but like if you can just find a routine that you can stick to for years and months and not take these like long extended breaks of, wondering if you really want to do it. Um, that's been, I think that's the most important thing to being successful at anything, and by far. And for me, I tried a lot of sports and activities and interests, but the only one that had kind of the staying power was cycling. It just engaged me in all the right ways. And, if I'm bored of the road bike, I can do my mountain bike and vice versa. And, if I'm bored of solo rides, I can do group rides. And there's always just kind of a new outlet that allows me to stay consistent, but also feel refreshed and kind of like I'm doing something new. And I like tinkering with my bike. I like working on bikes. I worked in a bike shop for a long time. So I kind of enjoy all aspects of it. So for me, and I think for anyone who wants to be good at this, it's just find whatever that looks like for you, that makes you consistent. You know, if you need to skip the foam roll, cool down, perfect routine, whatever, but because it makes you less crazy, and you can just kind of you get your 5-6 rides in a week. I think that's better.
Hmm.
You
Nice.
know.
Great answer. And I think Charles has a follow-up because we saw an activity you did last year that Charles did as well.
Yeah, no, yeah. So where I was going to ask was, you did the 70.3 half Ironman last year,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
like we don't see a lot of guys, kind of your caliber of bike rider doing that at this particular point of their career. Would love to hear just a little bit about that experience and whether that whet your appetite for more, or if you're like that was a one and done.
Yeah. So I started with running. That like my sisters were all extremely good runners. My older sister Avery won something like 15 state titles in high school, and so I kind of was like looking up to them and being like, okay, like I've always liked running, and I did a little bit of cross country, but it didn't quite, like I said, I mentioned like didn't have the staying power of cycling. So, but I've always kind of put running on a, kind of a like one day I'll like return maybe. Um, and I've always liked running. So as soon as the off season hits and you've got to take your little break, um, I like to run. And so every year I usually do run like a half marathon or like a trail race, or I've got a little local like uh power hike segment called Malin's Peak. It's like half run, half hike. Uh, and I try to give that a good whack every winter. And then this winter, my girlfriend Lexi and her sister Jenna wanted to do a half Ironman, and they had both. My girlfriend is an ultra runner, and her sister Jenna had done like some shorter triathlons and was kind of like building from like the sprint to the Olympic to the, I don't know if there's something in between Olympic and half Ironman. But anyway, so we all decided to do that half Ironman together as just kind of like a fun family challenge and visit Lexi's family in Florida. So yeah, I suck at swimming, but the running,
Wait, so you got to, would you do it again, or is that like
yeah.
after the bike racing career, you like look into that more? What's your viewpoint there?
Yeah, no, I would do it again. I don't have one planned for this winter, so I probably won't do another one this winter, but I would do one again. I really do want to do a full one day as well. I think a full though is kind of like taking it to that next level where it does sort of affect your off season. Whereas this one, I was able to kind of just like throw it in there, take a few rest days, kind of back to the plan. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, full is quite the undertaking. But one day I'll do a full, and I would
Did
do it. I would do it again for sure.
did you ride the Ventum tri bike?
No, I had not
They didn't give you one?
linked up with Ventum at that point because it was
Rats.
like, yeah. Anyway,
Hmm.
so I was on a gravel bike actually
Oh.
with a clip on.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Pushing 350 watts for
not
speed.
after that swim, man. The watts were good.
Oh my goodness.
Swimming's hard. I am not a swimmer either, and it's like you kind of survive the swim, and then you recover a little bit on the bike,
Hmm.
and then get through the run. But yeah, swim's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. They line you up because I think it used to be big mass starts, but they line you up now like you kind of self-report your expected swim time. And I like did, I kind of searched through results and kind of was like, all right, I can do this in like, I think it was like 35 minutes and like the winners are doing these swims in like 19 minutes. And so I'm like, I can swim half as fast as them, right? I'm looking at the people I'm lined up with self-reported, and they're like, some older folks. I'm like, okay, I'll be cautious here and I'll pass a few of these people on the swim. No, I went straight backwards. Yeah, I finished like
Dude's doing
got out of the
breaststroke.
pool. I was like dizzy. Yeah, it was so hard.
I love
Humbling.
that.
And then you're just passing people on a gravel bike for the next 2 hours, probably like 2.5 hours.
funny.
Yeah, I think my Jenna, my girlfriend's sister, her husband Alec was looking at the thing. I think I made it over 1,000 passes during the bike sale. Oh,
That's amazing.
it was
So
funny.
funny. Wait, you guys should do Charles, when is St. George's in the spring, right? They have to do that early, don't they? May?
It's like this last year was May 4th. So I
That's
think it's
probably
that
too
first
late.
weekend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Shit.
guys are like deep into,
Sea
well, at least Grand
otter.
Prix. Yeah. Sea Otter and all that.
Yeah,
Shit.
it's got to be pretty like kind of in that November, December range. Otherwise,
Okay,
it's
let us know if you're doing another one. We'll get you a Mi Duele tri-suit. You can wear it.
deal.
Okay. Um, we wanted to talk. I mean, Lifetime's kind of just announced this big change up for next year. Can you talk about being in the series and if you see it going forward in 2025 if you're going to apply?
Yeah, I will apply. It's I think it's a really good cool opportunity to be involved. I'm always very torn. The changes they made were, I think, the
Yeah.
most. I mean, obviously, a few events changed, but I think they lowered it from 30 to 22, and then three
Mm.
people will be added after Unbound.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, on the one hand, I think there's a reason Lifetime has found such success and built so much hype. And I do think exclusivity is, for better
Mm,
or worse, part of that.
mm,
So, I can't fault them for continuing to keep the series pretty exclusive. But on the other hand, I think there's a lot of guys on the cusp who deserve to be there, who are like really professional athletes that, take the training super seriously and are ready to be there and, continue to miss out. And it probably affects their ability to get sponsorship support too. And that's definitely a bummer. So
mm.
I would like to see them grow rather than shrink that. Because I think even if it was 50 people, I think that's a pretty select field when you're talking about Unbound and Leadville and these
Yeah, for
massive,
sure.
and it's not like it doesn't even affect the field sizes because they let anyone register. It's only the scoring, but yeah, the way they invest in promoting the athletes a little bit and the rider cards and the signings and the
Yeah.
point series and um, you know, we had the Pro XCT series in off road, and I don't think even when I was doing it, I didn't pay attention to who was winning
Mm,
that series. No one cared about the overall for that, and it was just like who's here today at this race, and that's who you're racing.
yeah.
So I get it, but I wish it grew a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah. It is kind of I mean, it's like, it's understandable, but at the same time, it's like, well, this kind of sucks to cut.
Yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
it's also it's like not that big a number, right? Like 30 going down to 25 or 22. You're
Is it really
like
that
it's
Yeah,
much?
just like what are you actually getting out of?
yeah, are
I
you
don't
really
know.
losing much by having 5 extra people? Like,
Right.
are the original 25 athletes suffering because of those 5? I don't think so.
I
But
don't either.
Yeah.
on the other hand, too, like they've had 30 and 35 in the past, and it does seem like 4 or 5 of them like don't finish or have some sort of
Mm,
sponsorship complication or can't make it over from Europe or wherever as easily as they'd like. Um, so maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Do
and
do you feel?
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask on that Europe comment. Like, do you feel like the international scene is paying more attention now to Lifetime? Like, has it? I know we've seen writers coming over internationally, but like, is that interest increasing, or do you think it's about the same? Like, how do you think about
Yeah, I
that?
think I think it is increasing. I think like the European gravel scene has kind of responded like in 2023. I think maybe that peaked, but then now you've got kind of the UCI gravel stuff growing, but you've also got the like gravel earth series,
Hmm.
the Traca and the Rancho gravel. And those ones getting a lot more hype and attention from the European scene. And so I think a few of them are saying like, oh, maybe we don't have to go to the US if we want to race professional gravel. I don't know, for sure what their thoughts are, but I mean, definitely at Unbound, you saw a massive amount of European guys. Like
Yeah.
it was like over half, I would say.
Huh.
Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, it just comes down to who they select, but I think I've also seen it's tough to travel over like Coney Looser last year. I know he did well in the series. He got 10th. And so he finished in the money, but even still this year he got invited back, but he had to take his name out of the running because he's just like, it's just too logistically complex to go to the US every month for 7 months in a row. Like it's just difficult.
Yeah.
Because there are opportunities and there are sponsorships, but if you're burning that on 7 international month-long trips in one year,
It's not worth it.
it's tough. Yeah.
Any thoughts on why they cut Crusher? Does anybody have theories on why they aren't going to do it next year?
Yeah, I don't know for certain, but my theory is just that they want the professional race to kind of um, parlay with the amateur race and build hype together and bring registration numbers up. And I think the Crusher and Rad are already filling up, and they are already also kind of limited in how many people they can host in those towns. And then also I think some racer feedback about having that many races at extreme altitude was
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
part of it. Yeah. And then I do think also, I think logistically next year's schedule is a lot easier because it's kind of like a spring block of races and then a fall block of races.
Oh, nice.
Whereas before it was like every month all year.
Yeah. Brutal.
So,
Poor Beaver, Utah.
Yeah, but bummer for us because it's fun to show up and see, your favorite pros riding, starting the race ahead of you. Like that's been a fun experience at Beaver.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it will still stay like elevated in terms of the pro turnout personally. I don't think it will go back to quite as small as it was prior. I don't know. I think a race that was in the Grand Prix last year is still going to attract a few guys that want to and girls that want to do well, and they still have a cash prize there. So I still think it'll be a bit bigger as far as pro show out goes.
Good.
Awesome.
Because Charles and I have fond memories of literally staying in Earth's worst hotel in Beaver, Utah. It was so bad. We like booked the wrong. We thought we were booking in one, and then we pulled up. I was like, "This is not the right one. This is not the Comfort Inn. This is the other one." And it was so bad, dude.
Yeah.
There was like a lady in the foyer like cooking like Indian food and like peppers, and I was like, "Dude, this is key to preparing for Earth's like worst climbing." So anyway. And Charles like flew in from New York the night before, arrives at this hotel, and he's like, "This is."
I could not sleep. That hotel just, and I have a lot of sympathy for bike racers because I know that like hotels are like a real luxury, but like the setup that year I was like, never again.
Yeah, we had a cabin rented up at Eagle at the resort this year, and then it got canceled, and we didn't get to try it out this time. That was gonna be a fun change.
Yeah.
Oh well, bummer. Cha, any other questions for Zach? I've got 2 more. What do you got?
I've been peppering them, so go for it.
Well, I just wanted to know. I mean, Zach, we have a lot of like our age gap is huge. So we have old guys that started the team. We have 20 somethings. If you were to like give advice to this group as a whole, anything come to mind when it comes to enjoying the sport or excelling at what we do? Is there anything that you would share as advice to a group of cyclists?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of touched on it before, but I think consistency is the most important thing if you want to perform, but also for enjoyment. Like I think consistency is a reflection of whether or not you're enjoying it, right? So I see some guys who come in hot and fast into the sport, and it's like they've got the perfect warm up and the perfect cool down and their stretch routine and their foam rolling and blah blah blah. And then after 6 months, they're like, "Wow, this consumed my whole life, and I'm out. Like I'm quit. I'm done." And I just think finding a balance that works with you and your schedule. I think group rides are super important. I think if you're a road biker and you don't have a gravel or mountain bike, you should get one. And then when you're feeling a little burnt out on the roadie, take your mountain bike out and switch it up. And I think that consistency and that enjoyment of it will pay dividends. And then I think that's the most important thing.
Nice. Great advice. Charles, any follow-up there?
What bike do you spend the most time training on? In terms of road, gravel, or mountain, like what's your daily, like which one do you put the most mile, like not miles because miles, but time?
I would say the gravel bike. I would like on the road though, like I'm
Hmm.
not on gravel that much, but it's rare for me to like grab the pure roadie unless I'm like going to a fast group ride. I just like I'll have like 40 mil like Kenda Fortitude tires on that roll really fast. That almost feels like road bike, but still can kind of like hop on some gravel occasionally. But yeah, the gravel bike for sure, and then the mountain bike second, and then the road bike probably third.
Nice.
Is that just so you can mix it up with variety, or just that's the tool you need to be training on?
Yeah, I think it's fun to be able to mix it up. And then also just like reliability too. Like I think if you're on like like 40 mil tires, you're gonna flat less, your back kind of aches less. You can go on, different little routes, and not be, so worried like, oh, I only have my 28s, so I can't go up Jeremy Ranch, or if I do go up Jeremy Ranch, maybe I pinch flat and then, I have to take like training takes an hour longer because I'm fixing a flat or whatever. That's one thing that I think the gravel bike is nice for, is just like not flatting, honestly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Guys, what else? Anything else? I mean, I'm like, I feel good about what we've done. I peppered all my questions, Charles. I'm interested to see like what you've got next, Zach, especially like next year. We are huge fans. I want to see, I hope everything works out with Lifetime and you're there. Is there anything you want to say about your sponsors? I know that's probably a big part of who you are and how you make everything work. Is there any shout outs you want to give to sponsors or anything before we wrap up?
So I mentioned the gravel bike I ride, a Ventum GS1. Love that bike, super capable. That's what we'll be running this next weekend at Big Sugar. And then I ride a Yeti ASR mountain bike, and both of those are Shimano equipped. So I run the 12 the 12 speed stuff XTR on the mountain bike.
Nice.
And I really enjoy it. I feel like a lot of people don't like, like a lot of the bikes are OEM coming with SRAM, and yeah, and I hadn't ridden XTR for a while until this spring, and it's pretty awesome stuff. So I've been super stoked on that, and then I run First Endurance Nutrition, and Kenda tires, and then
Nice.
LEL clothing. So yeah, I've been super, super stoked on the setup this year and hoping to continue with all of them into 2025.
Yeah. Your LEL kit is awesome. I love it. I've never
Thank you.
tried that. I've never tried that gear, so I'd love to
Yeah,
try.
it's really nice stuff. Yeah, if you like, they have the Del Dios bibs, and they're like, I'll put them up against any bibs. They are so
Mm.
nice. So super stoked on them.
What, Charles? Why they like $450? Are you looking
No,
at them
no,
right now?
I'm just laughing because we had an episode where we talked about like saddle sores and the
Yeah.
importance of like new bibs or high quality bibs or like, and so I'm just kind of laughing because like we both appreciate the benefit
Yes.
of good bibs.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like if it's like between a kit or just a nicer set of bibs, go for the bibs. Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and you got your first endurance bottles. I've been staring at them this whole time. So the excellent
Oh, yeah.
product placement.
Look at
Very
that.
good. Yeah.
There you go.
He's got Ventum and I think
I
Yeti
know,
covered
Yeti
there
hat.
as well. So this is
Check
good
me out.
product placement.
Nonchalant. Yep. Zach, thank you. Grateful for you. So fun to watch your career, and super fun to just meet you and connect with you. Dude, I say this. I can't remember who I said this to last time, but I was like, "Hey, when I see you at the starting line, like now we can high five. Now we can like be buddies." And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
That's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna
Yes, it
disturb. I'm not
is.
gonna disturb you in your pregame.
No, yeah, no, we're
Okay.
buddies now. We'll be
Okay,
high five.
We
All right, high
we
five.
we will cheer for you as we're heading up Columbine and you're like at the very
Yes.
bottom heading back in. We will cheer for you. So we'll look forward to that.
I look forward to it too.
Cool.
Thanks,
All right, man.
thanks, Zach. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you guys. Appreciate the time.
Take care. Bye.